Welcome to another Triathlon podcast, the podcast that brings the electrifying world of triathlons right into your headphones. Journey into captivating conversations, share the excitement of race recaps, enjoy the humor only a triathlete would understand, and join us as we debunk myths and bring you the bare, thrilling truths of the triathlon world. So feel your heart pound, breathe in anticipation, and get ready to dive into the world of triathlon. This is another Triathlon podcast. Enjoy the ride.
We are back with another episode of another Triathlon podcast brought to you by Mana Apparel. And today we are so excited to have someone join us, one of the legends of the sport, someone who has been around, seen it all throughout triathlon. We've got the incredible Bob Babbitt joining for us for a bit of an interview today. And then we also will jump into some of the things that are going on in the pro world and chat about the CAF Foundation. But first off, Bob, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to another Triathlon podcast.
Well, thank you so much. It's a treat to be with you guys.
Absolutely. We're happy to have you on. And I've got Josh here, as always, my co-host. So we're going to have some fun chatting all things triathlon. How are you doing, Josh?
Doing great. I'm really excited to have Bob here. We've got a lot going on in the industry, and I thought he'd be a great guest to give us his take on everything that's been happening over the last few months.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we jump off? I can't imagine there are too many who don't know who you are, but Bob, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you kind of got involved in triathlon and where that started?
Sure. I moved to San Diego back in 1978 from Chicago, and triathlon was just getting started. It started in 1974 out at a place called Fiesta Island here in San Diego, and it really was for the San Diego Track Club, and they were just doing triathlons as sort of a workout for runners. And so on Tuesday or Thursday nights, we'd have the swim, run, swim, ride type of things. It wasn't really it was sort of an event, but it was really just a workout for runners. And over time, Ironman started in 78. The first one was on Oahu in 78, and then in 79, they again were on Oahu. And an article in Sports Illustrated really piqued my interest and my roommate's interest. His name was Ned Overend, who went on to become one of the first mountain bike world champions, but mountain bikes hadn't been invented yet. So he was working at San Diego Suzuki as a mechanic, and I was a school teacher running a PE program in a little private school. And we read about this silly event called the Ironman that had 15 people in it and 12 finishers, and decided that, wow, it'd be fun to go do this thing.
Nice. That is very cool. It definitely piqued a few people's interest. Those who were kind of crazy enough to think that that was something achievable and something fun. But what was kind of your first experience with Ironman?
Well, first of all, it's not like you go online and figure out how to train for it, what equipment you needed. So what we did after reading the article, the guy who won it in 1979, his name was Tom Warren, and he owned a tavern here in San Diego called Tug's Tavern. And he also created one of the first endurance events. He did an event called the Tug Swim Run Swim, which was a half-mile swim around Crystal Pier in Pacific Beach here in San Diego, 5-mile run on the beach, and a half-mile swim around the pier. And Ned and I had done that race in 78, 79. And because of that, we were like, well, if we want to find out about this iron thing, we better track down Tommy because he just won it. So he invited us to meet with him, and in typical fashion, because back then people were pretty eccentric who were doing this type of stuff. When we tracked him down, he told us to come to his office, and his office was a motorhome just south of Crystal Pier in San Diego with a bike on the back and running shoes tied on the side view mirror and a paddleboard on top. And he was like, welcome to my office. And he proceeded to tell us, oh, you better get yourself a bike and you better get some running shoes. So we thought, or I specifically thought, that since we'd go out and ride our bikes, we bought these bikes at police auction, and it would take us, we'd be out there averaging, 12, 13 miles an hour. So our first thought was that you swam 2.4, rode 56, camped out, and rode back the next day and ran the marathon. So actually went out and got pannier, sleeping bag, and tent, and had that on the bike because I thought we'd be camping during this silly thing. And it turned out that my bike was a $75 bike from a police auction. The whole back end had been burned in a fire, and had a fuzzy raccoon seat cover, foam grips, a radio, Shack radio mounted on the handlebars. And we proceeded to head over to Oahu to do the third ever Ironman Triathlon World Championship, which, because of the article in Sports Illustrated, had grown from 15 starters and 12 finishers to 108 of us, including a guy who would go on to win 6 titles, Dave Scott, a guy who's, I think, run the Boston Marathon 46, 47 times in a row, Dave McGilvery, myself, a future race director named Rick Kozlowski. There's a lot of people who are still, to be honest, still in the sport to this day.
Now, at what point did you discover that it wasn't over 2 days and you had to do it all in one?
When we got over there, people were talking about, transition area and this and that. And it finally hit me that, you know what, I don't know if this makes sense. But I did go down to the start that day. And back then, there was no aid stations, no roads were blocked off. You had your own support crew. So I went down there, with my bike, and I still had my pannier, sleeping bag, and tent, and gave that to my crew. My crew, because I was a school teacher, one of the kids I taught, her dad lived over on Oahu, and he showed up in his little Fiat convertible with his 2 girlfriends. And that I gave them my 30 loaves of Hawaiian sweetbread, because who knew what to eat back then, and Gatorade. And then we got on the scale. They weighed us. And they had a rule that if you lost 10% of your body weight during a race, they pulled you out of the race. So you had to get off your bike, I think 3 or 4 times during a bike, and then again during a run. And that was a safety measure, which we had no idea where that came from. But the fascinating part to me was we were supposed to do the Waikiki Rough Water Swim. The original Ironman was Waikiki Rough Water Swim, the Around Oahu bike ride, 112 miles, and then the Honolulu Marathon back to back to back. Well, ABC Wild World of Sports had read the article on in Sports Illustrated. And so they happened to be on the island shooting cliff diving on Sunday and told the race director of the Ironman, hey, if your event is on Saturday, we got a crew here. We'll come film the thing. And the problem was the surf was huge. When we went to the pre-race meeting, the surf was breaking 10 feet up on the wall. Ned and I did all of our swimming in a 120 length to a mile pool at a condo, and we knew we were going to die the next morning. There was no way we could get out through this ridiculous surf. So the race director, because of ABC Wild World of Sports, and because the year before they had to delay the race a day, he would lose Wild World of Sports if he delayed it from Saturday to Sunday. So he called us all into this meeting and said, hey, good news and bad news. Good news, I got ABC Wild World of Sports here. Bad news, I have to change the swim course to Ala Moana Channel because otherwise I'll lose Wild World of Sports because we can't get boats out to protect you guys tomorrow. So luckily, all the Dave Scott, all the Navy SEALs who were racing, they were all upset. What a wussy event. You can't change the swim. And Ned and I were ecstatic because we're going to freaking live. So
that's kind of cute.
Yeah, it was crazy times. There was a guy named John Huckabee, 59 years old, which was considered ancient back then. He had done the Athens Marathon back to back to back, and he was really one of the few guys who had a sponsor in this event. And his claim to fame was running, but he couldn't swim. So during the 4 lengths of this Ala Moana Channel, as I'm swimming and staying as close to shore as possible, because I wasn't the greatest ocean swimmer either, I went down, and on my way back, I basically almost hit Incredible Huck as he was walking the entire swim. He's the first and only guy to get blisters on his feet during the swim portion of an Ironman. And then, because there were no cutoff times, later in the day, they panicked because they lost the Incredible Huck. They had no idea where he was. It was 2:00 in the morning. No aid stations, no cutoff times. They found him in a diner in Waikiki at 2 a.m. And he ended up finishing in about 24 hours or something like that. So it was a little bit of the Wild Wild West back then. And I remember as we're riding around, and again, we were wearing tennis shoes. There was no helmets, a wool jersey, because, cyclists wore wool jerseys. You had a long sleeve shirt and a wool jersey and a shorts beige shorts from one of the outdoor retailer type of places I think I'm the only guy to wear a leather belt in the history of the Ironman during the race. Now they call them tube socks. Back then they called them geek socks. We had these socks that went up to our knees. Had no idea what we were doing. So when we got going, and again, going through Waikiki, I got out of the water, riding through Waikiki, thinking this is the coolest thing ever, tuning in my radio, listening to Rolling Stones concert from Maui. And there's my crew on the side of the road at mile 25 with what I think is a Tour de France type handoff. And it was a Big Mac fries and a Coke in a brown paper bag. At mile 90 was a root beer snow cone. Ended a bike, roll into Aloha Tower, and I hear this music. And all of a sudden, there's my crew with a bamboo mat and a boombox. And they're like, how about a massage? So I had about a 45-minute massage between the bike and a run, which felt awesome. And then I got up and got weighed and waddled off through Waikiki, eating Hawaiian sweetbread and drinking Gatorade. And the next time they weighed me, I hear this guy on a walkie-talkie. He's like, hey, can you give me that again? This guy's gained 4 pounds. You can't gain weight doing this silly thing. But I could. But at that point, I'm running along through Waikiki, and then later I'm coming up Diamond Head. My crew's behind me. This event I thought I was going to finish in 2 days. Now I'm going to finish in 1. And I'm about to drop down into Kapolani Park for the finish. And I'm thinking there's going to be bands, there's going to be cheerleaders. It's going to be really exciting. And all of a sudden, I roll into Kapolani Park, and I look up. There's a light bulb. And then there's a chalk line across the road. And I slow down and I hear this guy in the darkness. He's like, hey, you. I'm like, yeah. You in the race? Yeah. You're done. I look over. There's one guy doing one-arm push-ups in the park. No Mike Riley, no cheerleaders, no bands, just me and the guy doing one-arm push-ups in the park. And, my buddy Ned, I get back to the hotel room. His girlfriend, who eventually became his wife, was his crew, and she lost him in the first mile of the bike ride, caught him at mile 95 when he was drinking out of the median strips, drinking out of sprinklers in the median strip. And he was out there a long time as well.
Wow. I actually, I just saw one of your buddies, Dave McGilvery, a couple weeks ago at the Boston Run Show. I'm a Boston guy, so
there you go.
Been following Dave for a while, and now he's got his one of his many proteges, Becca Pizzi, and she dragged Boston Bruin legend Zdeno Chara into the triathlon world, and the two of them are kind of adopted. I think Zdeno just signed up that he's going to be doing Challenge Roth this year, so that's all because of Dave.
Yep, Dave and I go back a few years. He was the only guy we turned in these. We had to write bios when we did the 80 race, and mine was PE teacher. And that was about it. And, Dave Scott's was, I'm a master swim instructor. John Howard's was the most impressive 3-time Olympian, Pan American Games gold medalist, cyclist in the 70s. But Dave, he had run across the U.S. I mean, we were just blown away. His resume was way better than Dave Scott's, better than all of us. He was the only guy who had really done any media type of things back then. And he was a rock star.
See, what I'm getting from this is I'm doing Ironman entirely wrong. The Hawaiian sweetbread, the massage halfway through,
exactly.
The stories, that sounds way more fun than what
more fun. But there was something. I was a school teacher, and finishing that event, thinking I was going to do it 2 days, it really gave me like a business card that told me I could do anything. It really, just coming across that finish line changed me. And, I left teaching and started working for a magazine called Running News, and convinced Mike Plant, who was the editor at the time, to change the name to Running and Triathlon News based on this silly event that had 100 of us finishing it. I just felt there was something special about this sport because it didn't matter. I remember seeing some of the guys were these big hulking Navy SEAL type of guys and thinking, when we were at the 80 race, thinking, oh my God, how am I going to compete with a guy like that? Well, being big and being strong doesn't necessarily make you a great triathlete. Triathlons, as I found out over time, is an equal opportunity abuser. It doesn't care. Big, small, in a wheelchair, missing a body part, get from point A to point B, you're a triathlete. And anybody can do it. It's a sport that you don't have to have a great skill set to do, right? You don't have to have hand-eye coordination. You can be somebody who is, the last kid picked in baseball, like Dave McGilvery was, and you could end up being a great triathlete. You never know.
You can
That is
ask
so
Jenna.
funny.
If you listen to some of our previous episodes, we talk about Jenna's lack of hand-eye coordination.
Exactly. Most of us do not have any of that. And I always tell people your skill set to be a triathlete is you wore arm floaties as a kid, you had a paper route, and you played capture the flag. You've got our skill set, right? You can run a little bit, you can swim a little bit, and you can ride a little bit. You're good. You're good to go.
But you mentioned a good point, though, that finish line mentality, finishing that and what it meant to you and what it's done for you since. That hasn't changed in this sport
Nope.
since. And now there's been a lot of changes, and we'll talk about that and get your take on it. But that is one thing that hasn't changed and will always be the same.
Well, and you think about it, when the Julie Moss episode happened in February of 82, actually, it was February 6, 1982, and Julie crawled to the finish line, that became what I call our original, that was the
origin.
That was what we call, oh God, I'm zoning. We call it,
it really exploded.
Reality television. Sorry. We call it the original reality television moment because you had this young woman. And so take a look back. So in 78, Gordon Haller wins the thing. The first time it's televised, Dave Scott wins it. And here's a guy who needs to cool down after doing a 140.6 mile race. People watching at home in Pittsburgh or wherever, they can't relate to that guy. In 81, John Howard wins it, and he's a cyclist of the 70s and Pan American Games gold medalist. They can't relate to him. So here's this young 22-year-old co-ed with freckles, with a trucker hat on, with a borrowed bra. And now you're watching her come apart at the seams in the last quarter mile of this Ironman thing. And people who are watching at home are thinking to themselves, she could be my sister. She could be babysitting my kid. But what is it about that finish line that is so important that this woman is collapsing and getting up and collapsing again and trying to walk and then crawling to the finish line? What is it about that finish line that's so important that someone will crawl to get there? And how do I get some of that in my life? That was our moment. And so people watched that and it changed everything. That led to the United States Triathlon Series in June of 82. And that was the big thing was Julie Moss, Kathleen McCartney, the rematch. And ironically, in that race, for the men, Dave Scott won it. And Scott Molina was second, and Scott Tinley was third, and Mark Allen was fourth. The guys who would dominate the sport really for the next decade and a half, actually next 2 decades, would be dominated by those guys who did that race in 1982. But all of that was because of Julie and Kathleen. That was our moment.
That was absolutely incredible. And I know that's something that I watched a number of times to inspire me to my first Ironman. It's funny how these days life is so comfortable. If you want it to be, it can be so comfortable that there is something out there where that amount of suffering, determination, and grit really inspires people. Is very cool to see.
And what people don't realize is while that crawl was going on, there was another battle that people didn't see, and that was the producer from ABC, Wide World of Sports, was screaming at the race director, Valerie Silk, in the ABC trailer right next to the finish line because Valerie had given permission to a group called Freewheeling Films to also shoot the event when she had an exclusive with ABC. And they were not very happy. ABC was not very happy about this other crew being out there. And he was in the process, the producer was in the process of telling Valerie, we will not be back. You violated your agreement. We will never shoot this event again. And his assistants kept coming into the trailer going, boss, you need to come see this. This is unbelievable. That's why Julie was crawling. He didn't see it. Valerie Silk didn't see it. They found out later what the most dramatic moment in our history was happening while Ironman was basically losing their TV deal.
That is crazy. And that's kind of the fun insights from behind the scenes that are fun to get from you, just knowing some of that history. And it sounds like from doing your first Ironman, then you got into the media side a lot more of it. So
I did.
How did that come around? And how, Breakfast with Bob is absolutely iconic. So tell us a little bit about how that transition happened.
Sure. So going from doing Ironman and then creating the school I taught at, I created a little thing called the Iron Kids Triathlon that the kids were doing because they were falling in love with the sport like I was. And then when I talked to this guy, Mike Plant, about his magazine, Running News, and becoming Running Triathlon News, I actually pitched him. I said, I'm putting on my Iron Kids event for the kids. You should come out and cover it for your magazine. And he goes, well, why don't you cover it? I go, I've never written anything. I said, well, you know what? Give it a shot. And I did. I wrote it up and he really liked it. And next thing you know, I'm become LA editor for Running and Triathlon News. I'm creating characters like the Old Fart of the Month, the Reverend Campagnola Minister of Triathlism, and just writing sort of off the wall Hunter S. Thompson type of features on races in Southern California. And Mike was the first one to tell me, says, he brought me to his office and he goes, listen, he showed me two piles of letters. And back then, if you didn't like what somebody did, you couldn't just send them an email or send them a text or leave a voicemail. You had to sit down, write a letter, find a post office, find a mailbox, put a stamp on it, and put it in mail. Well, these piles of letters, some of them were outraged at the Old Fart of the Month, or they thought that I was being totally out of line with some of the Reverend Campagnola Minister Triathlism things. I would basically write letters, phony letters and phony responses, and people would react. And he goes, what's important is if people don't care, if you're vanilla, nobody responds to what you're doing. If you're doing something that is driving somebody to write a letter and take the time to put it in a mailbox, you're creating passion. And you can work with passion if it's positive or negative. Passion is what you want. You want people to react to what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. And eventually, Running and Triathlon News went out of business. I created, I went to see those two cycling magazines in the state of California. And when Running and Triathlon News went away, myself and my partner, Lois Schwartz, was the art teacher at the children's school. She became a photographer and she took all those amazing shots of Dave Scott and Mark Allen, Iron War, all those shots. She became one of the best sports photographers of all time. And she was my partner in starting Competitor Magazine. But we went to Southwest Cycling and California Bicyclists and said, guys, if we did a magazine that included running, triathlon, and cycling, we think that could be really popular. And both of them said the same thing. They said, listen, we'd never put a skinny runner on the cover of our magazines. Triathlon's a fad. It'll be gone in 5 years. This was 87. And we love cycling, and that's all we're going to do. So we came home without a deal, and we had no idea what we could do, what we were going to do. And three friends came to us with a check for $17,000 and said, go start your own magazine. That was in April of 87. And in June of 87, we came out with the first edition of Competitor. And over time, we grew that from one edition to 11 affiliated magazines around the U.S., all of them free. And these 11 magazines, it was like a 500,000 circulation. And eventually in 2008, we sold what was Competitor Magazine to a group called Falconhead from back east to become the Competitor Group. And at the same time, they bought us, and I had 7 editions of Competitor, and I had a series called the Muddy Buddy Ride and Run series, and I had started a radio show called Competitor Radio back in 1990 because I wanted people who were sports fans, this was a sports station, to hear an interview with Wayne Gretzky and Magic Johnson, and then hear an interview with Dave Scott, Mark Allen, Paul Newby Frazier, and realize that our athletes are special too, that our athletes are at least as good as athletes in other sports, and they should know them. So, and then they bought a Rock and Roll Marathon. There was 7 rock and rolls at the time. Bought Velo News and Inside Triathlon, and we became the Competitor Group. We went from 22 employees to 500 over the span of 2008 to 2012. We went from 7 Muddy Buddy events to 18. We went from 7 rock and rolls to 34. So when you're with private equity, the foot is on the accelerator, and we grew really fast. And in 2012, we sold again to another private equity called Calera. I stayed on for a couple more years and then I left and launched Babbitville, Breakfast with Bob, and that all kicked off. And I was doing Breakfast with Bob starting in 2010 because, as part of Triathlete magazine. Then we went totally off on our own in 2014, and it's been wonderful.
Can you count how many podcasts are out there now trying to chase your footprints?
You know what? What's great is the more exposure there is for the sport, the better. I've been very concerned about the sport of triathlon over the last decade because, in 2012, we had 2,000 events in the U.S. And this last year, we had 700. That's not a good trend. We need to get more people into the sport. We need to get more people understanding that this is the fountain of youth. You can do this sport forever. If you're a 50-year-old runner, the orthopedic reality is you're not getting faster as a runner. But if you're a triathlete, you can get faster forever. Buy a better wetsuit, get better wheels, get a new bike, actually train a little bit, do some weight training, eat better. There's so many ways to get better as a triathlete, but the individual sport like running, you're going to break down. And our sport will keep you healthy. And again, it is the ultimate fountain of youth.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking about kind of growth in the sport, it's really been fascinating the last couple years here with the kind of the rise of the PTO and what we're seeing now with we've got the T100, the PTO series.
Yep.
We've got Ironman launch their own series in response to that. And then we've got the Olympics going this year. It is, at least on the professional level, it feels like we're in some very good days when it comes to triathlon. And hopefully that'll translate more to inspiring more people to get into it as age groupers.
Yeah, the thing right now, which is wonderful, if you're a pro triathlete and there's World Triathlon, there's Super League, there's Challenge, there's Clash, there is Ironman 70.3, and you've got the T100 series, the PTO just launched. It is a wonderful era to be a professional triathlete. And hopefully, with the more buzz that's out there, more events. We hadn't had many new events in the U.S. in the sport of triathlon. Well, now they're doing, Super League bought New York, Chicago, and Malibu. And PTO is launching their event in Vegas. And they'll be connected to the Clash Miami event, which I'll be doing my show from. They'll be connected with, I think it might be Alcatraz should be part of that series. I don't know if they've announced that or not, but I think it'll be Alcatraz. And then they bought the London Triathlon. You got Singapore and Ibiza. I mean, it's really cool. And then if you haven't been to a Super League event, those are so fun. It's great television. It's very, very exciting. Back in the day, we used to have a thing called International Triathlon Grand Prix in Australia. And it came to the U.S. for a couple of events, and it was just, 20-minute races, really, really fun racing. And that's what people need to understand, that you can do a triathlon and be a triathlete and never do an Ironman. You don't need to be out there and doing 6, 7, 8-hour training days. You can come and do a 3-mile run, a 10-mile bike ride, 150-yard swim in a pool, and be part of our world. And really, there are no limits, and you can do a triathlon of any distance and still feel great about yourself.
Absolutely.
I think the other step to that too, Bob, that the industry could do a little bit better of advertising is even the relay factor. Because I know I've introduced a ton of people to the sport that weren't going to be able to swim, bike, run, but they could do 2 or 1 of the 3.
Absolutely. I think that, it's interesting. There's a group out of this guy, Tom Richmond, created California Triathlon. And he's been doing great things. I think he's up to 20 events. I think he had 10,000 participants last year. He's got events in Virginia and in Texas and in California. And one of his frustrations was if it was a USA Triathlon sanctioned event and you wanted to do a relay. So here you are. He wanted people to do relays. So he was charging $75 for a relay. And if you're sanctioned by USA Triathlon, you were also adding on $15. So his $75 was becoming $90 a person for somebody who might be doing a 400-yard swim. And so that was one of his motivations for going, you know what, I'm going to do events and not sanction with USA Triathlon and do my own insurance because I don't want to be adding on $15. I'll bury whatever the fee is for insurance into the entry fee. So now he's got anybody under age 17 is free. Relays are $75. If you want to, you feel a little ill the night before the race, you want to transfer another race, no cost. It's understanding. Let's think as an athlete. What would I like as an athlete? And the athletes are responding, and his numbers keep going up.
No, that's very cool. And that's definitely what we need. I think triathlon sometimes gets a reputation of being something that's a little bit more elite. You need to spend all this money on equipment and races, and you look at an Ironman race entry and it's, oh, you gasp. So it's really cool to see endeavors like that where it is making it more accessible for people to just jump in and try it. Because once you try a triathlon, whether it's a relay or the whole thing, most people end up getting hooked. So it's just the best community and such a cool feeling crossing that finish line.
It is. And I think the welcome mat, our sprint and Olympic, those are the ones that I have the biggest concern about, because over this last decade or so, as people became so iron centric, it went from, most of us started doing sprint races, pool triathlons, moved up to Olympic, and then eventually 70.3 and full. Well, what happened is a lot of people came in going, I don't want to do that stuff. I just want to get my M.Dot tattoo. So it became a bucket list thing. And if you're a coach, you're not making money training people for sprint and Olympic. People are hiring coaches to train them for an Ironman or 70.3 or marathon. So you get a lot of coaches telling the athletes, hey, you need to do a brick workout this weekend. Forget about that short distance triathlon. Go do a brick workout because you need to do a long bike and a long run. Well, that hurts the short distance guys, because then all of a sudden those events go away. And then all there is 70.3 and full. And we need those welcome mat events to keep people in and to get new people understanding that anybody can do our sport.
That's really true. One of the first things I did tell my coach was I'm not giving up my local sprints. So
Good.
Incorporate that into my schedule.
Yep. And I think that's essential because, one, you're taking care of the local race director. I always say when race directors start driving around in Bentleys, then we know we have a successful sport. Yeah. We have a lot of race directors who've gone away. I had a race director in Indiana. He used to have 27 triathlons. Now he puts on 0. He goes, I put on trail runs in, it's a lot easier, a lot less impact. I don't have to worry about lifeguards or blocking off roads. I get it. So, the endangered species in our world are the race directors, and we have to do everything we can to support those folks because they have a very, very, very tough job.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm going to ask you a tough question in here next.
You got it.
Races and events coming up this year, with everything that's going on, what race are you most excited to see between the Olympics, Super League, Ironman series? What really is getting you fired up this year?
Well, two, obviously, to me, it's the Olympics and the Paralympics because actually the event at Clash Miami coming up, it is a Paralympic qualifier. So if people win their category down there, they're going to Paris. So that's, I'll be down there and interviewing a lot of these are athletes we've been working with at CAF for their whole triathlon career. So the Olympics, anytime there's the Olympics, I mean, you think about how the rest of the world schedule this year has been impacted because of the Olympics. Because of the Olympics, the Tour de France is not finishing in Paris, right? Yeah. They're finishing in Nice. Because of the Olympics and because everything got moved back, last year Nice was like the 10th of September. This year it's the 20th. The Ironman is October 26th. Everything in the world got shoved back because of the importance of the Olympics. So I can't wait to see if Fleur Duffy's going to come back and get another gold. The men's side with Alex Yee and Hayden Wild. And oh my God, there are so many amazing athletes. And what's going to be really exciting after this year, when a lot of those athletes hopefully decide, hey, I'm going to move up and do some of these T100s. The fields are going to be amazing. The fields are amazing already, but when some of those folks move up, it's going to be cool. The thing I love the most there was a period there where it was around 2012. We used to have this Toyota series, Toyota Cup. There was the Lifetime Series, New York, Chicago, LA, Dallas. When that went away, so many of those Olympians had to make a decision after 2012 games. My Olympic career is pretty much done. I'm not going to go. I can't go get a faster. Too many young people coming in. They had to move up to 70.3 in full. Mm-hmm. And some people like American Hunter Kemper is like, if I have to carry more than one gel, if I have to carry any gels, I'm out. Yeah. So we lost some really, really good athletes because they didn't want to get into 70.3. They wanted non-draft Olympic distance racing. So, I think now we're back at a period where Alex Yee, Hayden Wild, those type of athletes, Flora Duffy, if they don't want to, they don't need to step up the longer distance. There's really good money in Super League and World Triathlon. If they want to, they can. But I love it when athletes can do what they want to do and control their own destiny, not feel like, oh, if I want to be a professional triathlete, I got to go train for 8 hours. That's not, to me, that defeats the purpose of our sport.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really curious to see after the Olympics from the short course athletes who goes to Super League, who tries the T100 series in there. It's definitely going to be interesting to see what decisions are made there and just make for some wicked racing either way.
Oh, yeah. And when we've seen over this last, when Jan Frodeno comes from the gold medal and 2008 and eventually gets in the longer distance after 2012 games, just how immediately he had such success. And same with Daniela Ryf. She would, 7th in one Olympic Games and 44th in another Olympic Games, and then moved seamlessly into the longer distance. And it's funny, her coach, Brett Sutton, wanted her to do, he felt that she was an Ironman athlete, but she had no interest. She wanted to go do at Switzerland, at the Ironman Switzerland, they also had an Olympic distance race. And she wanted to do the Olympic distance race. Brett wanted her to do the full. So the compromise was she'll do both. So she wins both. And then she ended up, winning. She ended up winning 70.3 worlds and then getting second to Mirinda Carfrae at her first Ironman in Kona. I remember sitting with her at Breakfast with Bob in 2014. And we're sitting there, on Ali'i Drive is where Huggles on the Rocks is. And she's like, so is this where the run is? I just love that. She had no idea. Where is this course? This is like Wednesday of race week.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Seeing talent come in like that and have immediate impact, that's what makes it so much fun to interview folks. When I first interviewed Lucy Charles Barkley, it was just Lucy Charles back then. I asked her, because she was trying to make the Olympic team in 2012 at the 10K open water swim and at the 1500. And I said, give me an idea how many meters you swim a week. And she didn't hesitate. She goes, 100,000. And I'm like, I just almost fell off the chair. Wait, 100,000 meters a week? It just blew me away. But that's the type of talent was coming into the sport. And it was just awesome to see.
It is absolutely incredible. And you mentioned with the Paralympics and your work with CAF. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Because it has made such a positive impact within our sport.
Yeah, I mean, CAF is just hand in glove with Ironman, and my relationship with Ironman. In 1985, there was a guy named Jim McLaren who was an offensive lineman at Yale. And he was taking acting classes in New York and was on his motorcycle going to class one day when he got hit by a bus, thrown 90 feet in the air, dead on arrival. He lived and lost his lower left leg below the knee, came back from that and reinvented himself and ran a 3:16 marathon with a walking leg. And then I met him in Kona. He came over to Kona and went 10:42 with a walking leg, not a high-tech prosthetic like you see today. So he goes 10:42 in Kona. At that point, he's traveled the world. He's sponsored by Budweiser. Everybody knows who he is. He's a one-legged guy who's changing perceptions. Well, 8 years later, here in Mission Viejo, he was racing a triathlon. And when a van went through a closed intersection, hit the back of his bike, propelled him headfirst in a pole. A guy who was an amputee became a quadriplegic. And through competitor, I'd covered a lot of wheelchair athletes. And when I'd ask them the worst part about their new lot in life, invariably it was, I'm 30 years old. Here come mom and dad back in my life. No sense of self, no sense of independence. So myself and two close friends, Rick Kozlowski and Jeffrey Essicow, we got together and we were like, we're going to put on a little triathlon for Jimmy. We're going to raise $25,000. We're going to get him a van with hand controls to give him independence. We raised 49 and thought, great, job's done. We'll get Jimmy the van. And then 3 amputee women came up to us and were like, listen, it's great we did for Jimmy. We competed in a relay today because of Jimmy. But did you know when you get injured, your health insurance covers a walking around leg or an everyday wheelchair? Nothing to do with sport is covered by insurance because insurance companies consider sport a luxury item. You guys know sport isn't a luxury item. It's a huge part of who we are and what we do. So that's when we got our 501(c) and decided if someone needed a piece of equipment or training or travel to stay in the game of life through sport, that CAF would be there. And now it's been 30 years. We've raised $159 million, sent out over 44,000 grants to challenged athletes in all 50 states, 73 countries, and more importantly, in 105 different sports. We just sent out our first grant in wheelchair pickleball this last year. And then last year we sent out 3,996 grants totaling $7 million. And right now starting in March, we'll be sending out probably, over 4,000 grants and probably closer to $7.5–8 million worth of grants. So it's what started with one guy. We say from one came many. When we started with one athlete and now there's athletes and we head to the Paralympics. If we had been a country at the last Winter Paralympics, in terms of our grantees, we would have been 6th in the medal count. CF would have been 6th in the medal count. And, half of the U.S. team will have received grants from CAF.
That's really neat. I mean, one of the first interviews we had last year when we started the podcast was Ben Hoffman, who's hopefully going to be making it to Paris with Owen as his teammate.
Yep.
And it's amazing what they've done and the attraction it's getting within the professionals and some of the elite athletes to be participating in it, especially Ben towards the latter stages of his career, to continue on in the sport with that as a role. I mean, really cool to see, and the inspiration that whole CAF community has. I remember one of my first races getting out of the water and getting a picture from Ironman afterwards, and there's a guy in the background lying on the ground at the water. I was like, what's going on? And then I zoom in a little closer, and he's getting his prosthetic put on.
Yep.
At the base of the ramp. And then you're doing the bike, and there's paracyclists and hand cyclists, and the inspiration they give everyone else in the community that's of able body to keep going. And what is pain? I mean, it's relative.
Well, what's fascinating with when we started CAF back then, when you talked charity, it was late night television, a woman named Sally Struthers, violin music, and please help these poor people. It's all sad. It was all people were pitied. And I didn't want that. So if you look at our original photos with Rudy Garcia Tolson, at the time was an 8-year-old double above knee amputee. Tim Mantuani is this amazing photographer, and the shots of Rudy, low angle shots, hero shots, hands on his hips, looking directly at the camera. You see both prosthetics, and basically what the photo says is, yeah, what are you looking at? You want a piece of me? You want to come race? Give me the right equipment and I'll kick your butt. And that's always been what we're about. People underestimate the power of sport. And sport changes your life in so many different ways. And just getting a piece of equipment is all it takes to get somebody back out there and just feeling the wind in their face again. And Carlos Maleta won the Ironman 5 times. He was shot in the back in Panama, and Navy SEAL. Paralyzed from the waist down, came back to win the Ironman 5 times, the last time when he was 50 years old in the hand cycle division. But he told me, he says, Bob, when I leave my wheelchair at the pier in the morning, I'm just like everybody else, right? I jump into the bay. I want to, do the swim, do the hand cycle, do the run, and become an Ironman. That's what it's all about. And again, it's equal opportunity abuser. Doesn't matter. Get there, you got the heat, the wind, you're dealing with the same crap everybody else is dealing with, and you're getting the same medal and the same shirt. And that's what it's about, is just creating equality across the board. And Ironman from the very beginning has all been about allowing allowing people who might be considered different or challenged to find out what the Ironman experience is all about. And back in '94, when they first allowed Dr. John Franks with his hand cycle and his racing chair to come do the race, and then we didn't have a hand cyclist actually finish the bike under the cutoff time in '94, '95, '96, and '97. It wasn't until 94, 95, 96. It wasn't until John McLean from Australia in '97 made all the cutoff times and went 12:21. And then the following year, Carlos Moleda went 10:55, which would have won the first two Ironman races all overall. So people were doubting, gosh, will a hand cyclist ever be able to make the bike cutoff time? Yeah, I think we'll be able to do that.
Absolutely. Now, we won't take up too much of your time here, but is there any way that people can kind of get involved or support CAF?
Absolutely. Yeah, people can just go to challengeathletes.org and just check out the work we do. People can volunteer, people can donate. We've got, we do a gala in New York every year. It'll be this summer. We do a gala in San Francisco. We have our what we call the best day in Tri, which is our San Diego Triathlon Challenge, which is always a week after Kona. So it'll be on November 3rd this year. But that weekend, what I love about that weekend, we'll have 150 challenge athletes from all over the world there. And it's we put on a triathlon, but there's also wheelchair basketball clinics, wheelchair tennis clinics, open water swim clinics. People get a sense of what our athletes deal with. Plus, the parents come, and we forget that a lot of these kids are from small cities, and they've never met someone like themselves. They're the only wheelchair person in their town. They're the only amputee in their town. I had a mom come up to me a few years ago at our event in San Diego, and she goes, for 363 days a year, my son feels like a freak because he's the only amputee in our city. And people stare at him all the time. When he comes here, there's legs laying all over the place. He's the same as everybody else. And these kids create bonds that will last the rest of their lives.
That's absolutely incredible. Now, as for you, where can we have breakfast with Bob this year?
We are going to be going to Clash Miami to start out, then Oceanside 70.3. Hopefully Challenge Roth. I haven't firmed that up yet. And then we'll be in Nice and be in Kona. And then and there'll probably be another one after Nice, there's Ibiza. So I'd love to go do another PTO event besides Clash Miami. The byproduct of what PTO has done by bringing the dollars in, bringing TV in, is they've basically put Ironman in a position of doing better, taking better care of the pros, creating that. I don't think that Ironman World Series comes about if it wasn't for PTO. I think what PTO has done is said, we believe in the pros. They need to be better. They need to be compensated better. They need to be revered. They need to be celebrated. And I think Ironman has done an amazing job this last couple of years doing that. But I don't think that would have happened if it wasn't for what PTO, the competition side of it, what they brought to the table. So, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah, you're exactly right. There's no way that Ironman series happens without the T100, and as we now know. And I'll hopefully run into you at Oceanside. I'll be out there in April. Excited for that. My second year out there, and my wife has actually been talking about putting together a relay team. She was a little late this year, but looking to do some stuff for CAF while we're out there.
Well, you know what? CAF has spots at Oceanside. Okay. So that's it's a big fundraiser for us. We're the official charity. We have a luncheon on the Friday. You're more than welcome to come join us. We'll probably have between our athletes and our fundraisers over 100 folks on that course. And we've got a great field of CAF athletes who'll be participating. So feel free to come join us after the race. We have our own little VIP area with massage and food, and you're more than welcome to join us at that. And then on Sunday morning with the Ironman Foundation, we'll be doing a swim clinic in Oceanside, I think at EOS, the fitness center. We'll be doing a swim clinic for challenged athletes in conjunction with Ironman Foundation.
Very cool. Very cool. I'll definitely reach out to you about some of that stuff because I definitely want to get involved and help out. Charity is a huge part of my life anyway. So we'll do
Love
that. I think one last question I had for you before we let you go, Bob, is, and you mentioned it a lot, what can we do to keep this sport growing? What can we do to kind of turn it around? What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are we need to encourage our race directors by getting people out to participate. We need to support the local races, support our local races. It's important that, Ironman 70.3, we want those guys to be really, really successful. But I think a big reason why not Ironman numbers in the U.S. have not been great as well. Right, there's a number of the Ironman and Ironman 70.3 races where their numbers have dwindled a tad over this last decade. I think that goes back to losing a lot of our welcome mat events. If you think about Wildflower, if you think about a lot of these events that are gone, well, those events lead to people doing 70.3 and Ironman. And I think it's important for everybody to understand that the most important asset here is our local race directors and helping them out in any way, shape, or form. If it's volunteering, if it's sponsoring, if it's asking them if it's promoting their event, helping them promote their event. Those are the folks who need our support the most.
Incredible. Well, thank you so much, Bob, for taking the time to join us on here. We'll put some links in the show notes to both your social media and then CAF Foundation as well. But we sure appreciate you taking the time, and it was really great to chat today.
Pleasure. Thank you so much. Best of luck with the show. Keep doing great stuff.